Hello and welcome to Becoming Unstoppable Fitness and Weight Loss. We're your hosts, Lynn and Stephanie. We're just two ordinary girls. We were born without skinny jeans and we fought hard to become fit and fierce. Now we're coaches who get to share our passion for health and strength with others.
We started this podcast so we could share the knowledge and insights that have helped many of our clients with an even larger audience, and our dream is to help you become unstoppable.
Okay, today is episode 24, and we are so excited to have Dr. Mitchell Rogers in the house. Welcome, Mitchell.
Thank you for having me.
Mitchell is a chiropractor, and he has joined us for the previous two episodes. So if you didn't catch those, be sure to tune in. We covered some really great topics, and he had a lot of interesting information to share with us. Today, we're going to be talking about how to effectively manage stress for improved weight loss and fitness. And I think it's interesting that you help people deal with stress as part of your practice. I didn't know that that was part of what a chiropractor did. I didn't know that was part of, what do we call it, scope of practice or whatever. Mm-hmm. But can you explain to us how that relates to chiropractics and how that relates to, well, I guess you describe yourself as a nerve doctor, mm-hmm. right? So I guess it does make sense that stress would relate to the health of your nerves, but can you help us tie it all together and help us understand your role?
Yeah, so a lot of people, when we think of stress, and this will be kind of something I think the audience will be able to wrap their brains around because they've heard it before, but the fight or flight response of the sympathetic nervous system. And when you are stressed, that is the sympathetic tone kind of takes over your body. So that creates an increase in cortisol, that creates lack of digestion. So like your body, when you are stressed, doesn't digest nearly as well. You don't sleep. It's harder. So when it comes to weight loss, if you're stressed out, our body wants to hold on to all the calories possible because it's stressed. It thinks we don't know where our next meal is coming from, what's going to happen to us. So let's store these calories. Let's keep this weight. Like, I don't care if I didn't burn it today or I don't need it today. I'm going to keep it for later. As opposed to potentially, if you're not as stressed, saying, oh, okay, we can use these calories. We don't have to hold on to everything.
Yeah.
And so it's very kind of multifactorial of what stress does, but how I can help as a chiropractor or any chiropractor out there, adjusting especially the thoracic spine to create more of a parasympathetic tone and mm-hmm. letting that rest and digest kind of feeling take over helps a lot. I know for people that are feeling super stressed out, they come in, get an adjustment, and a lot of times that next night they'll report the best they've slept in weeks, months, whatever it is.
I love it.
Because their body finally fell out of that sympathetic tone or fight or flight and went into the parasympathetic tone of the rest, digest, kind of let everything kind of relax a little bit better.
Yeah. Now, a lot of my clients report, I'm a fitness and weight loss coach, as you know, or just weight loss. I'm a weight loss coach, but I work a lot with the mental components involved. But a lot of my clients report when they are stressed, they lean out. So what do you attribute that to?
So it can go one of two ways. It depends on the kind of stress that you're putting your body under, and some people respond differently. Some people stress eat. Some people which because of that, like the act of eating and doing things like that is parasympathetic. So that's why a lot of people will stress eat, is because they are so much on the sympathetic tone side of their nervous system that they want to get that to balance out. And the easiest way to do that is through eating, and especially eating things that are sweet.
Okay.
Actually. So that can be part of a reason why people will hold on to weight. Some people, their bodies do go into kind of like a hyperdrive feeling of where they get rid of everything. And they're burning so many more calories because they are super stressed. And so that can cause them to lean out.
But then that can also cause like deterioration of your other bodily functions. So we don't want to go into that kind of hyper mode, even though we might be like, ooh, I'm losing weight.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, not good, not sustainable. Let's put it that way.
Okay. And so the weight comes right back on as soon as we go to regular drive instead of hyperdrive. So I have found something fascinating, and I'll share it with you and see what you think about it. And Stephanie, your feedback is important too. So I have figured out when I get super stressed out, I guess this goes back to fake it until you make it. So I can actually like say like right before I give a speech, I can actually like, it's almost like calming the demons. I can put myself in this other state. I can like literally calm myself down so that all of a sudden I can like think clearly. I can, I think I'm like controlling my central nervous system. I can also do it, like I think about the look on my face. So like, I think like you either have a scared look or a kind look. So if I just put a kind look on my face, like all of a sudden it calms me down internally. Is anything that I'm doing like real? Is this like, am I able to control my state?
Yes, you are. Through different breathing techniques is a great way to kind of tap into changing that state. Power poses. So that's something that we learned about a lot in school, and we do before every test, is 30 seconds of holding a strong and powerful position. Whether you feel confident or not, if you hold that position for 30 seconds a minute, it has shown you to, one, perform better at athletic events or mental events, but also reducing levels of stress in your body because you're portraying that confidence.
Isn't that crazy?
So like putting your feet up on the desk, kicking back like the big CEO, that's one of them. Putting your hands on your hips and sticking your chest out like Superman, that's another one. Doing things like that can actually change the level of cortisol and lower it, so that way you are more confident and you are in a much lower state of stress.
Which makes you more, at higher thinking capacities and better functioning overall.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. So like we don't necessarily have to make the stress go away, right? We can just do these little hacks.
Yes, especially if you don't have to, like, I would do it randomly throughout the day. So first patient of the morning or whatever, it's like, all right, let's portray confidence and have that thought and feeling. Like maybe you wake up that day and you're not feeling great or whatever it is, then you do that power pose for a minute, and all of a sudden you get done and you're like, all right, I'm ready to conquer the day. I'm ready to go about my day. And maybe you find a lull in the day where that feeling goes away. All right, hit your power pose again, or do your breathing technique again. I've become a big believer in like meditation, and I know that also can have a large change in the cortisol levels and the overall stress that you feel just by being able to, that's one place where you go and you can have control, is in your own mind, and being able to control your breath and do those things. It gives our body of maybe when things are spiraling and you feel like you can't grasp control of anything in your life, that's your free space to where you can go and be in control, and that our bodies do a lot better with thinking that we're in control at least. Yeah.
So I have a problem with meditation. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I enjoy it also. Definitely, I get where you're like controlling your breath. But when people talk about controlling your mind, I have a hard time. Like I can control my focus, I can control my eyes, but I can't necessarily control my thoughts. And so that I think leads to a lot of frustration or a lot of question for a lot of people. Like, wait a second, what am I supposed to be thinking about, or am I not supposed to be thinking, or how do you size this all up?
So it's funny you say that, because for the longest time I thought meditation was just poppycock and it didn't make any sense to me. I would do it and my mind would wander and I couldn't like ever bring it back to my breath. Like I'd set an alarm for 10 minutes and it felt like 20 minutes went by. And then now I've done it a little bit more. I'm a little bit better about it, and it still doesn't happen every time I meditate, but there will be times where I set my 10 minutes for meditation and it feels like 10 seconds went by.
And where does your mind go?
I try to just keep it on my breath at all times, and not let it wander. Whenever you notice that you're starting to think about the stresses of your day or whatever your next task is or something, anything other than your breath, you try to bring and draw it back into only thinking about your breath. And that gives you that feeling of control and knowing, okay, this is okay.
So what are you, sorry, finish what you're
I
saying.
am.
Yeah. So what are you picturing? Like I have a very active imagination. I have to always picture something in my mind or it starts going off on like my day. So like, do you actually picture like the empty space or your lungs expanding or your diaphragm or what's the picture in your head?
For me, so for the long time, it was the lungs expanding, diaphragm pushing out, and trying to really focus on the form of my breath as well. I know we've talked about it in some previous episodes of trying to make sure that my breath starts in my stomach, in my diaphragm area, and then once that's full, then it kind of makes its way into the chest, and the chest expands.
Okay.
And not just, they call it a 3-part breath, so where the diaphragm expands and the stomach expands, then the chest, and then it gets into the head. And so taking full deep breaths, I think of those things. And then I actually have, I'm going to butcher the name of them, but they're Jahapmala beads.
Okay.
And so they're made for meditation. And so every time you exhale, you're supposed to move one bead over. And that was big for me because it gives me something to touch and that gives me something to kind of think about.
Yes.
My eyes are always closed, but I'm thinking about where in the chain am I? Because it's just a circle of 108 beads, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And you're supposed to, every time you exhale, move to the next bead, and it kind of keeps your mind centered.
Oh.
That one was definitely one that helped me.
I'm gonna have to check those out.
Wow, yeah, that's cool. And I will say I've always been kind of like meditating. But if I just thought of it as breathing, for a while I was doing like 3 minutes of breathing every morning with like my Apple Watch, and it made a difference in my day.
So you're meditating.
I was meditating, I didn't even know it because I was always like, oh, meditating's so frustrating, just like Lynn. But if you don't think of it as like a goal to get somewhere, I just had to be like, oh, I'm going to breathe 3 minutes in the morning before I get out of bed. And it started my day off more in a positive manner. Because normally instead of focusing on breathing, I'll just think, oh, I don't want to get up, I want to go back to bed. But instead of that, I'm like, oh, I just breathe for 3 minutes. And then that alone, without even thinking of it being like, oh, I have to meditate, was huge. So maybe mentally it's good for people that feel frustrated with that to think, you just have to breathe and then see how it goes.
So the best part about that is it takes everything away from your brain. So like you were thinking, oh, I have to do this, I have work, I don't want to get up, and you're thinking all of those things. So instead of like you have those thoughts throughout the day constantly, that everything is constantly going through your brain, you always have a new thought, a new everything. So you take 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, to where you're only focused on your breathing, no real thoughts are coming to your head. It's a mental break is really all it is for your brain to kind of reset and go, if whatever made you angry or happened earlier in your day that may have thrown you off, it's kind of a time to reset, flush that away, and it's almost a new day, kind of is how my mentality is, at least after I get done.
Yeah, because I'm thinking our thoughts are always about overcoming challenges, right? That's really the only reason we think, I think, overcoming challenges. So like for those 3 minutes, you're not thinking about any challenges. Your only challenge is to, I guess, complete the 3 minutes.
Just hang out and breathe for 3 minutes, and then I don't know, for some reason it worked. Like at first I was like, I felt like I had to concentrate too much, but then like after a few days I was like, I can literally just lay here and breathe. I don't have to worry about it, just do it. And then once I stopped putting like the pressure on myself to do it right, whatever that would be, then it was like became a really positive thing.
Good.
I need to start doing that again. I lost my Apple Watch, so I stopped. But if I start that again, maybe
you can just do it on your phone.
I can do it without it.
Camera.
Yes, it was just very handy.
Absolutely. All right, let's dig into this a little bit more with Mitchell. So our first question is actually, what is stress?
So we've kind of touched on it a little bit with the release of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which comes from back to the kind of the central nervous system talk as well. The hypothalamus and pituitary gland will send a signal to your adrenals, so adrenaline, things like that. Cortisol will then get released into our bloodstream, which will increase our heart rate. It actually will dilate the blood vessels to like our extremities. So more blood flow will go to our extremities. Basically everything that we would need to run away from a bear, that happens to our body. So our pupils dilate, they get bigger, so that way we don't need to focus on something that's right in front of us. We need to focus on the tree line or whatever it is to get away. That's where our bodies are going in those stressful times, and that's not always where we need them to be. And so, yeah, it's great if we're going into an athletic competition. It can actually increase your performance on certain things, but if you're going in to take a test or a big interview and you're stressed out and nervous, and it can actually cause you to be counterproductive in how you perform.
Well, and I'm wondering about, like, in an athletic event, like, what is the threshold? When is it helpful, and then when do you go over the edge where it's like you're blind? Like, I can no longer see, I can no longer think, I am now over the edge. How do you tell?
That's a very person by person dependent thing. I've seen a lot of people where stress actually makes them perform better. They are better performers under stress, and then there's others that if there's no stress, they're the best you've ever seen, but you put a little bit of stress under them and they crumble and they can't figure it out. So I know for me personally, it was as long as I could keep my heart rate in check, I was okay. Because it will increase your heart rate as well. So back to the breathing and doing things like that.
That could be.
Taking a few deep breaths, cycle breathing. So inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold, and you kind of repeat that. We call it a box. It's all 4 seconds.
Box breathing.
Yes, it's good to kind of regulate your heart rate and bring everything down and calm you down just a little bit.
Yeah. So I've noticed from personal experience, and actually my kids too, if I feel like the threat is too big for me, like unmanageable, that's when I go into that unhelpful place. But if I feel like, okay, I can handle this, if I feel up to the challenge, then that stress is good for me. So I guess my question is, like, do you know what I'm talking about when I describe this? And is there a way to maybe chunk down our stress so that we do feel confident in some situations?
So yes, I get what you're saying. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Basically, when it comes to stress, like being able to have the ability to wrap your brain around the task at hand and have that be like, okay, this is all that needs to be done.
Yes.
And it feels manageable.
Yes.
It says, okay, I'm not going to overly load you with stress. We're going to be okay.
Yes.
But it gets to that point where you feel helpless and it's unmanageable to where, okay, it's easy to become overwhelmed by stress, and actually, instead of I have 100 things I need to get done, now I do none of them because I'm crippled by stress and by the fear of everything that needs to get done. So having that thought of like, this is manageable, I can do this. That is so important. Because whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. Because our brain will tell us what we can and can't do. Our brain's amazing, and the only thing that is giving you that signal of you feel like you can't is what's between your ears. And
I mean,
you're the only one necessarily thinking
this. Yes, I've heard people say this, but for the folks at home, I want to give you something more substantial, because that almost can leave people in like a shamed place, like, oh great, now I don't feel up to the task, and it's my fault, it's all my fault because of what I'm thinking. So I'm just thinking something useful would be like, okay, so say you're up against a fierce competitor, like a tennis opponent that's like way over your head, right? So that's when people change it to, okay, instead of beating them, I'm just going to show up and give them a run for their money. Like give yourself something manageable.
Mm-hmm.
This is my goal. So that you don't go into that, you don't go over the edge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever use that for your clients.
No, definitely goals of any kind is important. As long as you have that goal in mind of what you're going for, it gives you that target, and it's a very finite, like, did I reach it or did I not?
Yeah.
And that's what us as humans, like how we're wired to, I think,
Yeah.
is, okay, this is what needs to get done. This is what my goal is. This is where I will be satisfied. And so if I can get to that point, okay, well, I'm happy.
Okay.
And so setting those, make sure they're realistic, but also make sure that they aren't set too low and you're selling yourself short, I
Okay.
would say.
That's very good advice. Realistic goals. And then even I'm thinking like in the tennis scenario, okay, 1 point at a time. My goal right now is get the next point.
Mm-hmm.
And then you lose that point, you're like, okay.
Get the next one. It's what it has to be, especially in a situation like that, because if you get down on yourself, you've
Mhm.
already lost. If you think, oh, I can't beat this guy, you
Yeah.
can't. Like, you're not gonna, it changes the way that you end up playing the game.
Oh, absolutely. Or I'm thinking like, okay, if you lose the point, just be like, okay, I'm gonna hit the next 3 shots to his backhand because I know his backhand's weak. Okay, that's my goal now.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is, and I love the fact that you're bringing that up of like, okay, short-term goals. Short term is in the next 30 seconds.
Okay.
And then there's another goal in 30 seconds later.
Okay.
And then changing those goals of, they say you can only handle what's 10 feet in front of your face.
That's good.
And so that's a military term of like, take care of the 10 feet in front of you. And because it's like, all right, that's to your next guy, that's your help. And so you control what's 10 feet in front of your face, and that's all you worry about. And so have that
like
30-second
that.
goal, have that 1 minute goal, and then after that, create a new one.
That's
Find what's
so
the next
good.
thing that you need to do.
That's so good. Because how many of us, like, even as we're sitting here talking, my mind is over there problem solving about one of my kids,
Mhm.
right? And there's absolutely nothing I can do with her in her situation at her sleepover right
Mhm.
now, right? And instead of like focusing on, no, my goal right here is to ask Mitchell great questions. So now I'm incompetent in 2 areas and it leaves you completely powerless. Yeah. So focus on the 10 feet in front of you. That's really good. I don't think any of us will ever forget that. Thank you. We all need to go in the military, in my opinion, just for like a year.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yes.
go through basic boot camp or basic training. I think would be good, a little good for everybody, honestly.
Did you ever have any military experience?
No, I haven't. I've listened to a lot of books and things like that, and I think there's just a lot to be learned from that level of discipline.
Yes.
And I thought it was very important to kind of wrap my brain around what's truly possible too.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's one good thing about the military is they push you to your limits of what you thought you were capable of. And knowing like, oh, I can do more than I think is
Okay.
it's a liberating and powerful feeling.
Have you ever read any of the like David Goggins stuff?
Yeah.
Yes.
David Goggins, Jocko Willink, there are a few really good ones that just show a lot of accountability and
Yeah.
internalizing things and kind of showing you that mindset of what you might need to get things done.
Yeah. And do you think there's a difference between men and women in like the amount of push, the amount of like our stress threshold?
I wouldn't say that, it's what's important to you. For each person, it's just what's important to you. Because I've seen women that are tougher and more hard-nosed and are willing to push a lot harder than a lot of men that I know.
So you don't think it has anything to do with like testosterone? I was just thinking about maybe other hormones.
It again depends on what the goal is. If it's a physical competition to where like it's only to endure hard things, I think women would be just as good at that as men.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, if it's now you're putting a man and a woman to fight or do something like that, then that gets a little bit of a different story.
Yeah.
But when it comes to just the bit like mental ability to overcome and do those types of things, women are just as strong mentally as men. And like, especially like ultra distance running, women are just as good, if not better than men a lot of times on those once the races get to 100 miles plus, because they're better at handling their own minds and pushing through pain and just keep going. So
yeah, well, I mean, maybe this is a muscle, right, where you have to use it, because I think before I really started engaging in sports and training and that kind of thing, I think I think stress was like a bad thing. And now that I attribute it to actually more muscle, I don't know, I attribute a lot of my confidence to more muscle mass, and that could just be something, I'm connecting the dots where there are no dots to be connected. But I do think that since I've, I guess, met my own expectations, now I'm like I'm more able to handle stress.
Yeah, and that kind of, I feel like, leads back into the whole confidence discussion that we had earlier. Once you gain that muscle mass, that might have been something that you were insecure about, or that you wanted to have more muscle mass. And so the fact that you were able to set your mind to a goal and then you accomplish that goal, it's like, what else can I do? And you have that confidence. One, you're like, okay, I look better, I feel better. All of those things are confidence boosts as well.
Yeah.
But then I did something hard. I did something that I didn't know if I could do it, and I set my mind to it, and I put in a lot of work, and I got there.
Yes.
And there's a lot to be said for that, and be able to kind of put your mind at ease. It's like, hey, I did this thing that was hard, so why can't I do this?
Yeah, sure. I see that a ton as a trainer, whether it's like physical changes in the gym or like completing an event. I start to see differences in how people carry themselves and interact with other people and how they dress even. And it's amazing like how you can take that stress and turn it into such a good positive thing. Make that stress drive you rather than drain you.
Yes.
It's a real thing. I see it in people all the time.
I
Pay
love
attention,
it.
you'll see it.
And I love how you light up, because watching anybody's transformation like that is so fun. That's the best part of this job. And I'm sure you get to see it in your practice all the time.
And the funny part is, my favorite is when they haven't noticed it yet, but everyone else around them can see it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you'll know it's there in a week or two, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But right now, everyone else can see how far you have come and how much you've changed and how much more confidence you have. But you'll get there. It's kind of cool to see.
Yeah. So, I don't know, maybe it's muscle, or maybe it's like the confidence that comes along with it. So maybe there's the hormones that can go into it, but whatever it is, it does make a real difference in people's lives.
I think our question for you is, what's the difference between good stress and bad stress, and does it really have a lot to do with us?
So good stress is something that I figure gets you kind of excited. So like a competition, that tennis match, like that's good stress. That is, it leaves you a little bit excited. You might be a little nervous for it, but if you win, you're going to be really excited, really happy. A first date, same kind of thing. Like it could go really good, it could go bad, but there's that unknown there. And so like that's a fun stress versus the stress of certain relationships or work or whatever that may be. That's going to be more your bad stress, the things that are just worrying you. There's no excitement, there's no fun. Like for some people, good stress is a horror movie. Like it makes your body go through those same types of feelings and release the same chemicals. I personally hate horror movies. I don't get the point. I'm like, why would you pay money to be scared? But for some people, they love them. And so that's a good stressor for them. So kind of is person by person of what is good stress versus what is bad stress. Like some people like to go run marathons and go do those types of things, and that's very stressful on your body, but for some people that's a really good stress. So it's kind of person by person on what you would consider good and bad. But like we were talking about earlier, when you're so stressed about the hundreds of things that you have to get done, that's more of a bad stress. But if you're looking forward to something and you're a little nervous about it, that's more of a good stress.
Well, I was also, as I was listening to you, I was thinking, well, a lot of it probably has to do with how much control you think you have in the situation. So a relationship can seem very stressful. You know, it can seem like a lot of bad stress if you feel like you don't have control. But then another option is to look at it and be like, okay, well, what do I have control of in this relationship? What can I control? And then that turns it into not so bad stress. As soon as you figure out, I always say it's a problem solving thing. Like, what is the exact problem and how do I go about solving it?
Yeah. Problem solving, and also just shifting the mindset of like thinking, okay, I can't control this, but I can control this. Let's focus here.
Yeah.
And let's only think about this and kind of shift away from the bad stuff and focus on the good part of things.
Yeah.
Eliminating stress, obviously, whenever you can, by what we were talking about earlier, kind of saying no. It's like, hey, this doesn't further what I want to do. This doesn't give me energy, and this isn't focusing my energy on what I want to focus it on. Say no. And being able to have that control of your life goes a long way. It puts less things on your calendar to get you more stressed about. And so that one's really big, but then also kind of like what you were talking about, the reframing of your mind of like focusing on what I can control and only what I can control. And then that also is another thing that it empowers you and puts you in control and not just like what happens next.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to hear your opinion on this as well. This is just something I've been playing with in my coaching practice and also in my life. I used to be of the mindset that you can't control other people, you know, because you always hear that saying, you can't control other people. And now I'm kind of like, you want to make a bet? And so I just this is just kind of fun, just something to talk about and maybe, you know, bring up a good point for the people at home. But what do you guys think about this?
Okay, big picture, you can't truly control people, but you can manipulate people 100%. And I think so many people think of that as like a bad thing. Oh, you're manipulative, which it is bad because I've been in a position where I've been manipulated and it hasn't been a good experience. And then I realize it, you know, long term. But I think the whole dynamic of a relationship, whether it's friendship, romantic relationship, family, like, you know how you behave towards someone is going to cause them, especially if you know them well, it's going to cause their behavior to change one way or another. So big picture, you can't fully control someone, but I think you can shift how someone treats you and how they behave towards you by your own actions. So there is an aspect of control.
Yeah.
But, you know, it only can go so far with certain things.
Yeah, and I've learned that I used to think like my words were very impactful, but I've learned that my silence is very impactful, more impactful than even my words. So when I don't say things, then all of a sudden people are like, it definitely changes the dynamic. I'm more talking in like a family situation. Anyway, so my takeaway is that, like, yes, you can, I don't want to say control, you can influence your environment always. And a lot of it has to do with, and I always know that my intentions are good, so I don't have like a fear of manipulation, because I'm like, well, if the end result is good for everybody, I don't really care if it's manipulation or not. If the end result is like in their best interest and my best interest, we're all good. Anyways, what's your take on it?
Kind of like what she said, you can't control somebody, but you can give them influence and say, kind of make them think and maybe even just question the way that they think and just say, hey, these are how I'm feeling, how I'm thinking, and kind of going about it a different way and not necessarily being like you are wrong and changing someone's mind. And
right, because that would be force.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's like letting them kind of come onto that conclusion themselves, where it's like, hey, let's look at this from a frame of logic and say, why do you think this way? Why do you feel this way? And kind of attacking it a little bit differently. And then, I feel like you kind of can control people and you can make them maybe realize like their error in thinking.
Yes.
But letting them come to that conclusion and not you forcing it on them.
Yes, absolutely. And I definitely believe in questions and bringing people to like sound reasoning. I think that's all really useful stuff. But I have noticed, like with my clients, the minute they feel like, a question, are you sure you don't have any control in this situation? And then the minute they feel like, oh, like I can control some things, oh my gosh, it's like a huge burden comes off of their shoulders and they feel much better about the relationship.
Yeah, and they feel like they did it because they came to that realization, so it gives them that empowerment kind of too that we were talking about. So
for sure.
It's a double-edged sword, that's for sure.
Yes, so good questions. Glad you brought that up. Very important. Okay, what's our next question for Mitchell?
All right. How do we reduce bad stress? We kind of went over that, but how would we eliminate or reframe it? So, I mean, this, I guess, comes down to mindset, right?
A little bit, definitely. You can kind of set your life up in certain ways, kind of planning out the day before. So I know what I'm doing during this time, and this time. And sticking to that plan as much as you can. For some people that can cause them some stress, just because then when the plan doesn't go exactly how you want it to go, people freak out about that. So
why is that?
That's back to, I think, the control thing more than anything. It's like,
or is it because they don't know how to be flexible? Or adapt. Like, okay, this is the new, like change course a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like a cognitive flexibility thing?
I could definitely see that being the reason for it. I don't exactly have a perfect answer for you on that. But that would make sense to me is, okay, I was set in my ways of like, this is what I'm doing this time, and this time. Oh, now that's changed. And it's like, all it takes is 30 seconds to wrap your brain around, okay, now we're doing this. Okay, now we're doing this. Rechange the schedule and go. For some people, it's not that easy. It's like, no, but why? I was planning on doing it like this, so why do I have to do this? I can do that, this, that. Like, no, calm down. This is what it is now.
Yeah.
Just be able to take that step back and now attack this new plan, new problem, whatever that may be.
So maybe they just haven't had practice at it yet.
I'm one of those people. So actually, so I will say this, I've been very I think I was at an unhealthy point in life where I'm like, there goes 3.5 minutes of my day. I had to sit at a red light for an extra 1.5 minute, and that eats 8 3/4 minutes into my lunch break or whatever. That's kind of how my mind was working for a long time, and so I still kind of have anxiety when my schedule isn't planned out. But it does take practice. But once I recognize that about myself, I'm like, I can't live like this where I'm worried about literally every half minute of my life and my time being wasted or whatever.
Yeah.
It was practice for me to be just stop thinking about that. You don't need to stress about 5 minutes of your day. Just enjoy your day, go on with it. You're going to get things done. Yeah. So I think with practice, people will get there. So if you're like me, it's possible. I wouldn't say I'm 100% there, but I feel like I've made close to a 180 from 3 years ago.
But I love that about you, that you are very disciplined. And I think a lot of people who are health inclined towards health, I think that's something that we have in common. We're very conscientious. I mean, this is an overgeneralization, but this is just what I've noticed. Conscientious, planned, routined. But I think a lot of people who aren't naturally that way, if you look at different personalities, you have conscientious on one side and then carefree on the other. And some people who aren't super conscientious, they look at conscientious people and they're like, oh my God, they're so rigid, and that looks like a terrible life, and I don't want to live that way. If that's what it takes to be healthy, I'm out. So I think from this conversation, I think we're realizing it's great to be conscientious with some flexibility in there too, and that keeps you from being in that real rigid place, that real uptight, nobody wants to be that person.
It's hey, make a soft plan for the day, but if something changes, it is okay. I know for me, very much all right, this is how my day is supposed to go, and when it would blow up, it used to really bug me, and now it's just like, okay, it blows up every day. It's just how long into that scheduled time until it blows up is kind of how it is. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you guys both have really, I wouldn't consider you like the uptight, rigid types. Like, I know, I mean, because you and I coach together, so I know you a little bit better, but I guess what I'm saying for the folks at home is like, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a terrible life.
No.
To be healthy and on track and planning your meals and, living by a schedule, etc. Okay, what's our next one?
Absolutely. How does having a strong, healthy body relate to stress levels?
So that's kind of an interesting question, I feel like, because all the things that it takes to get that strong, healthy body also help to lower your stress levels. So the endorphins that get released when you're working out are, one, they're good for you to work out and create that strong, healthy body, but also it helps to relieve that stress and act there. Same with the diet. So if you're eating a really crappy diet and not eating the things that you're supposed to be eating and things that your body doesn't agree with and that causes a lot of inflammation, that can cause a lot of stress. But if you're eating a good, clean diet and giving your body the food fuel that it needs, it decreases your stress levels a massive amount because it's not putting all that inflammation on your gut. It's not making that so hard to digest. It makes that job easier. Okay, so that's one less stressful thing, one less piece of a stressor coming at your body.
Well, plus you're getting the micronutrients and macronutrients, so your body's like, okay, I can stop looking for those now.
Exactly. It's like, oh, okay, so you gave me everything that I need to get the jobs done inside of my body to repair everything and do all the functions that I need. Okay, again, one less stress to kind of worry about and think about. So they go hand in hand, that's for sure.
So what do you eat?
So kind of funny you asked me this. I'm hit or miss. I try to be a little bit flexible with my diet. I wasn't for a very long time, except kind of back to the last thing we were talking about, where it was like, well, I plan my meals, well, I have to eat these meals.
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't. It is okay. You can have a cheat meal or whatever. But I do eat a lot of red meat. I think red meat is actually very slept on at how important it is.
Wow.
From a micronutrient profile. The amount of micronutrients in red meat versus every other kind of meat is a massive difference.
What kind of micros?
Zinc, magnesium, all of those types of things.
Okay.
Yeah, and organ meat is also very important. I don't do a very good job of eating it, but just because it's not really available, I will take like liver capsules or things like that.
I've heard about this.
Those are good. So the
Okay.
liver is where all of your B vitamins are really stored, especially. It's incredibly high in B vitamins. So that's something that's really good. My big thing is I actually kind of do what's called the vertical diet. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a guy named Stan Efferding. He considers himself the world's strongest power builder. So very healthy guy, but wants to look good while also being athletic and strong. But basically all it is, okay, you know what your maintenance calories are. You have a baseline of all of your micronutrients, and so you make sure you eat enough of each of those foods in a day to get in your baseline of micronutrients, and then everything else on top of that, as long as you've gotten your one red meat meal a day and you get your roughly number of calories in and amount of protein in, you can kind of eat whatever you want as long as it agrees with you.
Interesting.
So like certain people, onions don't digest well. They cause a lot of gut inflammation, or dairy or gluten or things like that. And so kind of playing with that, I would say, is important. But for me personally, I try to stick away from it. I notice if I go a long stretch of time with no gluten, no dairy, and none of those things that are really inflammatory for my gut, how much better I feel. And actually I will lose a lot of, it's water weight, it's inflammation, but I will lose 5 pounds and then I'll just sit there. And it's like, okay, that means this is where my body should be when I'm not holding on to all that extra water in the form of gut inflammation or that inflammatory layer of water underneath your skin that you hold on to because you have too much sodium in your system or something like that. So.
Yeah. I've been reading a lot about the vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
Do you work anything? Do you know about this? Vagal tone?
Yes.
Yeah. So now when I eat sugar, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're screwing up your vagus nerve. Is there any truth to that, or is that just a story I'm telling myself?
If you were to be doing it all the time, then yes. Every once in a while, it's not going to hurt you. It's going to be okay. As long as you don't get oversensitized to something. So like your body's used to having ice cream for every single meal, like, or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that might be a little too far. You should back off. But having one cheat meal a week or something like that is not going to kill your vagal tone or anything like that.
My vagal tone. Oh my gosh, we need to have a whole episode on just this because it relates to like heart rate variability, all of these fascinating things. Okay, what else do we want to know about this?
All right. How can you as a chiropractor help?
So we talked about the adjustments and things like that and how that helps and can reduce stress, but the other thing that I feel like I do a lot of in my office is manage the mental side of stress and talk with people, kind of have these conversations that we've been having here today of how to manage stress and then putting that, empowering them and maybe give them an idea. They're like, oh, well, I've tried everything to manage my stress. I've done this, I've done that. It's like, I'll just give them a little tip. Like, have you tried this? And they go, no, actually I haven't.
Oh, like what are some of your tips?
Just mostly things that we kind of mentioned throughout the day here, but the saying no and doing those types of things, being able to take care of that, the being able to empower them that they're in control of their body, what they eat, what their mental side of, because most of the time if they're seeing me, they have an injury, and so that injury causes them a lot of stress.
Yes.
And that's really what their big stressor is. I have patients that'll come in and is this getting better? I had this one sensation for a split second last night, and is this going to be okay? Is my arm going to fall off? Do I need to get surgery? Do I need an MRI? Like, and they will come in just freaking out, and so being able to calm that side of things down and be like, nope, this is all normal. This is what's happening, and truly break down what's happening and what's going on, and giving them that information, and then so they're not just guessing and they're just confused because. If we don't know what's happening, it's our body. Like, that's scary. If you think, oh, if this is going to get worse, I might die.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily always that serious, but people will come in and think that it is. And so being able to manage that expectation and empower them to be like, nope, I am okay. Everything will be all right. And from a stress standpoint there is very important.
Yeah.
That mental side of everything.
Yeah, that's really good. I was thinking about my daughter with her popping hips and like she's a dancer, so immediately she's like, oh my god, I'm gonna need hip surgery or I'm gonna need a hip replacement. Like her mind goes to worst case, but it would be really useful to talk to somebody like you and be like, okay, well that's the joint, whatever the breakdown is, right? Just a scientific explanation so she knows every time she hears the popping, okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah, and it's funny. They'll come in and be like, oh, this is happening. And I'll be like, when you do this, does this happen? And they go, yeah. Like, how did you know that? It's like, because, and then you explain it to them and they go, oh, okay. And they just feel at ease about a lot of things.
Yeah.
So that would be one way I definitely would say people get less stressed by coming into the office.
Yes.
And doing those types of things.
Where do you stand on therapy? Because I know earlier when we talked, you mentioned something about talking to someone, and I'm thinking, well, you're a great person to talk to, but do you ever send people out to therapists?
So it's funny, people will come to my office and be like, you should really charge for therapy. It's like, just because you sit there and you just listen, that's all it is. And I haven't sent anyone currently for therapy specifically, but making sure that they have someone they can talk to. It doesn't necessarily have to be a licensed therapist. In some cases that is necessary, and I wouldn't recommend a licensed therapist. Yeah. But having that, whether it's a family member or a loved one, that, hey, when you're having a bad day and you need to get some things off your chest, you can just tell them. Yeah. They aren't necessarily going to give you advice, or they're just there to listen. It doesn't matter if they say a word back, you just get it off your chest, and that can go a long ways. At least I know for me personally, the first time that I ever really dealt with being so stressed out that I wasn't sure if I could handle it.
Yeah.
I had one conversation. It was about an hour long, and did anything get solved or handled? No. I just got everything off of my chest, and I felt a million times better.
Really?
Yeah.
I think that's so fascinating because my experience has always been like, well, I did nothing but just enforce my helplessness. I went and told my ego story or whatever kind of story that was, and I enforced my helplessness in that hour. And so I'm kind of anti-therapy in that regard because I feel like it reinforces a lot of helplessness sometimes. But I'm wondering how, because I heard your story and I like the fact that venting did help you, but I'm wondering how it did not enforce that helplessness in that scenario.
For me personally, and I know this can be very different for a lot of people, but when I say it out loud, I hear it as if somebody else was saying it to me.
Yes.
And I'm like, so? Like, why are you sad? Like, what's wrong? And it's like, you know what you need to do to fix this problem.
You go into problem-solving mode.
Exactly.
Yes.
When it's out loud and you hear it and it reverberates, I don't know
Yes.
what it is. Like, those thoughts are rolling through your head constantly and that answer doesn't pop into your head. But you say it out loud and you go, oh, that's what I need to do.
Yes. And
This
I
is where the
love
problem
that.
solving is. That's for me personally, that's kind of how I go. Like, I might, if I'm not talking about it, I go into that perpetual hopelessness and it makes it worse and does
Okay.
those types of things if I'm just internalizing things. But the second it comes out of my mouth,
You go into
I
problem-solving
go,
mode.
oh, that's where it is.
Yes. So that's genius. I think for a lot of people, they go into blame mode. So like, it's my husband's fault. It's my, or that, because that is that place of helplessness, right? When you're blaming somebody else. So I guess what I'm saying for everybody at home and us too is to remember, like, if you are going to vent, if you are going to talk about your stresses, try to get to that place. It doesn't have to be immediate, but try to kind of like nurse yourself to a place of problem solving.
And not go
Yeah.
straight to the woe is me.
Yeah.
That's not what this is about. This is, all right, get everything out in the air and let's look at the solution for this and not
Yeah.
necessarily just, I just want to throw a pity party.
Right.
And I think that's what we've kind of talked about in the past, except with ourselves, separate from talking to other people. It's like, it's okay to have those feelings, but then you fix it, like solve that problem from there. So I think that might just be part of the process for some people, is being able to talk out loud with someone. Because I literally had the same conversation with one of my good friends the other day, talking about like her career moves. And then once she actually talked about it, she knew exactly like what she wanted to do. And like, I was like, I don't want to influence you or anything, but just by saying it out loud helped her. So I think maybe it's whether talking to people or yourself, like it's okay to have that moment, but then you move past it. And it might just be different person to person, whether they can share with other people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think the problem was in my stories, I was always blaming someone else or something else instead of like, hey, how can you fix this?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
Looking inside and saying, all right, what can I do?
Really good. Well, thank you for everything you shared. I am for sure coming and maybe bringing the rest of my family, if they will agree, to come visit you, because I think you have so much to offer to improve our health. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
some
Yeah,
tips
bring the whole
and-
family. Definitely family friendly office.
Yeah, absolutely. Steph, do you have anything
No,
else?
I mean, I was so pumped that Dr. Rogers was coming on the podcast with us, because he's been amazing in treating me, and I feel like every time I've gone to his office, I've come back learning something, whether it's about my own body or just like health in general. It's amazing. So it's really refreshing to have a chiropractor that like is really well rounded, and it's not just like, here, let me crack your neck, bye.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing more knowledge today. I feel like I learned a lot.
Yes, I feel like this might be the future of medicine. This would be really great if more doctors were holistic like this.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely think that being all inclusive and looking at the body and trying to dive into it holistically first and seeing all of the different angles, as opposed to just like, all right, you need surgery. Oh, take this pill. And like, hey, let's try this first. You aren't in a life or death situation. You aren't super sick. You won't need emergency surgery. Okay, let's try to fix this holistically. okay, that's not working. Hey, there's a time and a place for surgery. There's a time and a place for medicine. Like, they're not saying that those aren't necessary, but let's try to fix it without those first. And if we can, awesome. If we can't, all right, where's our next course of action? How do we get this person better?
Absolutely. All right, and there you have it. Again, if you have any questions or comments for Mitchell, his information will be in the show notes. And if you have anything to ask myself or Stephanie, we would love to communicate with you. Again, all of our information will be in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this podcast episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast so more people can find it. And you can tune in next time for some more Becoming Unstoppable Fitness and Weight Loss.